Okay, Clayton, I'm so excited to have you today on the 8th Lane podcast. Why don't you start out and give our listeners just a little brief bio about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Clayton Young. Who is Clayton Young? I moved to Utah right before high school, and I went to American Fork High School, and I got to see that dynasty be born. Then shortly after, I went to Brigham Young University, and I really liked the team aspect there, and so that's why I chose to go to BYU. And I had a lot of ups and downs in my collegiate career, but culminated in my last college race, the 10,000 meter on the track, where I won the NCAA championship, and that was pretty special. And then I went pro, and that's been a whirlwind for sure. Lots of ups and downs as well through that. But the last year has been really exciting. I feel like I finally have mastered the marathon as I've moved up in distance. And in October, I hit the Olympic standard, one of two Americans to do that, and that was pretty special.
That was at Chicago Marathon,
That was
right?
At the Chicago Marathon in 2023. And I ran the 7th fastest time ever by an American, which was a stat that was
crazy.
Wild to think about. Something that was special about that is like I had looked up to a lot of other marathoners going into that race.
Yeah.
One of them in particular was like Mebka Flesgy. And, I've listened to his book probably a dozen times, and just really, he's the face of American distance running in my mind, him and Ryan Hall. And now I'm technically faster than him. And that was weird. Like when I realized they were like, oh, you're the 7th fastest American. I was like, no way. So that was pretty special. Super shoes, asterisk maybe. But, and then in February, Olympic trials, and one of two Americans to go 1-2, I guess, there and secure one of the spots for the Paris Olympics. But beyond running, who am I? I'm married to Ashley. We've been married for almost 8 years. We have 2 girls. They're 5 and 3. They are super precious. They make you experience all the emotions in one day, from happy to sad to joy. And it's been special to share this journey with them. And they're a big part of this journey. Oh, yeah. That's who I am.
I feel like that's going to be crazy for them too, because maybe your 5-year-old might have some memories of this Olympic time, but for them to look back on this 5-10 years down the road is going to be like, whoa, my dad's actually like an animal.
They're definitely like keep me very grounded, because like I'll go and run this awesome race, and then I'll come back and they'll be like, they'll be like, good job, Dad, but that's it. Like they don't care really, or they don't understand how big of a deal it is. Yeah. Which is really actually helpful for me, because then it makes me realize like it's not all about running. Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited to share this with them in 5 to 10 years. And maybe they'll understand it then, but they don't have to either. Yeah.
So I kind of want to jump to your marathon transformation, basically. Yeah. I did a little bit of research on you, and it looks like your debut marathon was in 2020, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to look at the stat that I wrote down. You were 136th in America.
I had no idea, actually.
Yeah. Congrats. You ran a 2:26, it looks like.
Really?
2:29, actually.
2:29.
Sorry.
That's how I was like, wow, you're...
Yeah. So tell me about that marathon. Where was that? Why did you run a marathon? Because the jump from 10,000 meters to marathon is pretty big.
Why did I run it? I think that question probably can be answered just in college. Like being under Coach Ed Eyestone, 2-time Olympian in the marathon, like he trains us with the idea that we'll be marathoners one day. I think it's just not like you will be a marathoner, but we just always are aspiring to that distance. And also we were training at that time in college with Jared Ward, 2016 Olympian at the Rio Games. He took 6th, former BYU alum, and he trained with us a lot in my college days. And so seeing him make the Rio team in 2016 and then take 6th was like pretty inspiring.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I guess I kind of always knew that I would eventually be a marathoner.
Okay.
And so why in 2020? Yeah, I've gotten a lot of like backlash, honestly, from like those that are closer to me in the sport. Like, why the heck did you do that? Because essentially what happened is I went pro in 2019 after winning the NCAA 10K, and I I qualified for the Olympic trials with a half marathon. That's an option for US athletes. But I got injured shortly afterwards. And so maybe 3 weeks before the Olympic trials, I started running again for the first time.
Okay.
And I'd only been training about 3 weeks, but I still decided that I wanted to run it. Call me crazy, but I just knew that experience would pay off in 4 years. And, you only do get one debut in the marathon. And as a pro, that can actually hold quite a bit of value. Like you can get big money for debuting at a big race. But for me, I just felt like I wanted to experience what it was like to toe the line at the Olympic trials, even though I wasn't ready to race. So I ran the first 15 miles with my good friend, Danny Carney. We ran 5:15s for a long time. I think I show up in the camera view once, right at like mile one, just to kind of see what that was like to be in the front pack. And then I pulled back and just ran with him. And then the last, 10 or so miles, like I was just in the hurt locker. Like it just was just,
on
just
3
finishing.
weeks of training. That's pretty insane.
Yeah,
How long were you out with that? What was the injury? How long were you out from it?
Yeah, if I remember right, it was like a posterior tibia tendonitis injury, Achilles-ish injury. And so I think it was probably December is when I started feeling that pain, maybe late November. And then the Olympic trials were February 29th of 2020, leap day actually.
Oh.
So I was cross training like a madman for a couple months and then started getting my feet on the ground. And yeah, it wasn't pretty. It was actually so bad that I was worried that the women were going to pass me, because the women start like 10 minutes behind the men or something like that. And they even told us, like, if you're not far enough ahead, we're actually going to make you do an alternate finish. So that way we're not in the camera view for the women. And, my time is actually slower. In fact, I remember 3 or 4 months later, I didn't even look at my time when I finished. Like I had no idea. I just crossed the line. But it was like 3 or 4 months later, and I thought for the longest time that I'd ran like 224, 225. And then someone was like, "No, you ran 229." I was like, "What? I ran 229?" Like I couldn't believe like how slow I ran. But I think there was a 7-minute mile in there.
229 slow.
Sorry, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of the women actually ran faster than me, and
that's crazy. Like some of those ladies are just like
they're
animals.
flying. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So what was your half marathon time then? Because based off of that, you can kind of predict what your marathon might be.
Yeah, I think I was 103:55-ish.
Okay.
Like barely squeaking under the 104 qualifying time.
Okay.
So I don't know what that would convert to, but I don't know, like 216 to 212, maybe somewhere in there. That's probably what my time should have been. Granted, the Olympic trials are championship style racing. It's not about time, it's about place. And what did you say my place was? 136th?
136th, yep.
I had no idea.
Which is crazy. Now you're second fastest in America.
Fastest, yeah.
So 4 years from 2020 to 2024.
Yeah.
Where was the jump? Like now your fastest time is a 2:09. So you cut 20 minutes off of your marathon.
Yeah, 2:08 flat.
2:08 flat. Oh, wow.
2:08:00.
So 21 minutes
off
your
21 minutes. Like where was the jump? It didn't come right away, that's for sure.
Okay.
My next marathon was the Chicago Marathon in 2021. So about a year or so later, year and a half later. And it ended up being a really hot and humid Chicago. And so time kind of went out the window. You usually run Chicago because you want to run fast. It's a fast, flat course, 50,000 plus people in the race. It's really competitive. It's a world marathon major. It's a big race. And I, was hoping to erase that 229 from my history. And I think for me, the goal time was always this time in my contract of 2:10:30. For those that don't know, like in professional running, you have a contract and there's usually time bonuses associated with it.
Oh, okay.
And at 2:10, 2 hours, 10 minutes and 30 seconds is where I had a pretty significant bonus. And so that was my goal time. But with it being hot and humid, that kind of went out the window.
What do you think? Just dehydration, or did that take a toll on your energy?
Yeah, I think a little bit of dehydration, but ultimately I think I just went out a little too hot. Like I went out a little too fast. In fact, it was almost a perfect race. What ended up happening actually is with about a mile to go, I was kind of in a breakaway with like one or two other Americans. And I was really excited because I felt like I had the best speed. And so I felt like I could outkick most of these other Americans and be the top American on the day. And I think right then we were like 6th, 7th, 8th place. And I was like, wow, top 10 world marathon major, like in essentially what I consider my debut marathon.
Yeah.
Would have been phenomenal.
Yeah.
But then with about 300 meters to go, there's essentially the only hill in Chicago, and you couldn't even call it a hill. It's like a bump. But I essentially hit that hill and my legs started cramping, my hamstrings and my lower back. And I hit the ground. Like I hands and knees hit the ground, 300 meters to go. And like for the listeners, that's like the last 2 minutes of a 2-hour marathon. That's like, that's less than a lap around the track, right? That's 300 meters. Like I collapsed.
You can like see the
finish line.
Yes,
I could see the finish line.
What were you thinking? Anything?
Yeah, or? I was so anxious. I was like, I gotta finish. Like I think right then I was in 7th place and I was the second American. And I was like, this is it. Like I just gotta get across this line. And there was this point where, I start seeing these other runners pass me and I get so like worked up that the medics rush me and I say, don't touch me, because if they touch you, you're disqualified. And so I'm like, don't touch me. I'm finishing this race. So I get up on my feet, but it's not pretty. And I probably only run another 150 meters and I collapse again. Like right there. Like I hit the ground and I get to my feet one more time and I essentially collapse across the finish line. And I added I was going to probably be 2:12, 2:13, and I ended up being 2:16, 17, 16.
Holy cow.
So I added 3 minutes in the last 300 meters, and I faded from 6th place to 13th place. And it wasn't pretty. And that was like, yeah.
Yeah, what did you feel after that?
Yeah, it was like there was a point of elation, because it was like, wow, if I can get 26 of the 26.2 miles right, I was so excited for my next marathon. There was like, that was awesome. But then there was also like this feeling of like, that was so close. Like I could have been the top American. I could have, been in the top 10, and that would have done loads for my career. In fact, the guy that ended up being the top American, he ended up being able to go represent the United States in the World Championships. And it just in Eugene. And anyway, there was just lots of like opportunities missed. So there was a lot of highs for sure, like with it going so well for so long, but there was also a lot of like, I was so close. Like I was so close, and I was really anxious to run another one. But generally like feelings of like, okay, I think I can do this marathon thing. But little did I know that it would take a couple more. Yeah.
So really crossing that finish line, it ended up just being leg cramps basically.
Yeah, hamstrings and lower back. Like I was essentially like folded in half. Like that's I could not stand up straight.
Intense cramping.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, if you go look at the pictures, check it out on my Instagram. But like I am crossing the finish line, and you can tell like I'm in complete rigor mortis is what they call it. Like where like I have no control of my hamstrings and my lower back. So I'm like, I look like a zombie.
Rigor mortis is like what happens to people when they're dead.
Yes. Like I had zero control.
Oh my goodness.
Talk about hitting the wall. Like I know a lot of people hit the wall in a marathon, but that was my experience, and it was painful.
We're excited to announce our first podcast sponsor, Kreatures of Habit. They have a great overnight oat product called Meal One. There's a ton of different flavors, and each flavor has just about 30 grams of plant-based protein. You put it in the fridge the night before, take it out the morning of, and you have a nice balanced breakfast to fuel you for your workout. If you use our code STORER at creaturesofhabit.com, you get 10% off. That takes an insane amount of like mental strength to even get your body to go into rigor mortis. Like that's some type of stuff that I've never heard of. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was wild. I guess that's what comes with being naive with your debut, right?
Mm.
Like you just like, you have no idea. You just go out there and run to your limit. And they had to wheelchair me off the finish line. And yeah.
It's kind of epic. It's a cool story.
There's something that's really cool about finding your limit, right? Like I think that's one of the reasons why people love running marathons or any distance that's just ultra or extreme, is that it's almost a long enough distance that it's cool enough to say that you just did it, that you accomplished it. Like you can say, hey, I ran a marathon last weekend, and probably more than 50% of the time, people won't even ask you your time. It's just cool enough to finish the distance and to find your limit and run it as fast as you can. And I think that's pretty special.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
So what did you learn, do you think, from finding your limit? Like you said, you lost a few opportunities.
Yeah.
But obviously that led to other races, which have now led you to being the best.
Yeah.
So what do you think you learned from that?
I think the biggest thing I learned, and it took me another race to learn this again, but just like how important it is to be patient the first half, or even the first 30K, 18 miles of the race. Like, I didn't cover Colin McCow's move. He was the guy that ended up representing Team USA. He was the first American. I didn't really respect him and his move, and in the later stages of that race, and it ended up costing me. And
when you say respect him and his move,
like I was like, who's this guy? Who's Colin McCow? I didn't know who he was till after the race. Like I just knew that I could keep with him and outkick him. Like that was my mentality. And like that confidence is important in a race, but I should have probably listened to my body a little bit more and made it to the finish line. I think, in 2022, so fast forward a whole year, and I get to race my marathon again, the Chicago Marathon 2022.
That's your marathon.
That's my marathon. Yeah, I'm back again. And I remember going through halfway for the Chicago Marathon and kind of having flashbacks to 2021 because, we were going through halfway, and this time it was almost the same group of guys. I was kind of having the same thoughts, and we were going so fast that, I was once again trying to run 2 hours, 10 minutes, and 30 seconds. But we went through halfway, and shortly thereafter, Zach Panning, another good American marathoner, he started pressing the pace, and we started going so fast that we were almost going to run 2:09 pace.
Dang.
And I was like, man, if I could run 2:09, if I could be a 2:09 guy, that would be incredible. But once again, I didn't really respect Zach Panning. Like I'd raced him throughout the last couple of years, and I'd always beaten him, and he was a D3 guy, and like I just felt like I could keep on him and I could outkick him. But I covered his move at like mile 21, and he broke me. Like he absolutely broke me. And he went out and ended up running 2:09:30, and then two other competitors ran 2:09:40, 2:09:50. And I faded all the way to 2 hours, 11 minutes, and 51 seconds. And it was just, once again, this lesson of like, gosh, like, yes, I can be fast on the track or the roads, but like this marathon, you have to be so patient. And almost, even those last couple miles can really add on minutes to your time. Once again, like I was on 2:09 pace and I faded to 2:11. So that was Chicago 2022. So maybe I didn't quite learn my lesson from Chicago 2021. I just...
A little bit better though,
A little
right?
better. Yeah. I didn't cramp. I faded a little faster. I went from 2:16 in 2021 to 2:11:50 in 2022. And
it's
then...
an amazing jump though.
Jump from marathon to marathon.
And this is years of... Like you train for a year, you run again. You train for a year, you run again.
Yeah. I think I tried to do Boston in there at one point, but I got injured. And so I had to scratch from that race. But yeah, essentially this is year after year after year.
I actually was at Boston or Chicago in 2022, like watching a friend run it. And I looked out my window. Yeah. We were like next to part of the course, and I watched the pro runners. You were there probably. I didn't even know who you were. Yeah. And just like it was one of the most inspiring like running things that I've ever seen. Just the energy of the crowd. The morning was gorgeous, and then just to see like the pro group rip through was like, holy cow, this is amazing. I love this.
Yeah, Chicago's pretty incredible. Like the crowds, the course, the vibe, the feel, the weather can be incredibly nice on a little windy, but like there's no other. It's a world major marathon for a reason. It's pretty big.
So 2022 Chicago into 2023. 2023 was your best year at Chicago.
Correct.
What changed that for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, shortly after Chicago 2022 is actually, it's kind of funny because what happened in that year is there's a lot that happened. Essentially right after Chicago 2022, I started having some knee pain.
Okay. And
I started dealing with that knee pain. Like I was seeing doctors and physical therapists and doing all those like homeopathic remedies you find on Google and like doing everything you can. But ultimately, like it wasn't going away. And so in February of 2023, I had knee surgery. And let me tell you, like that's like the worst time possible to get knee surgery because it's the year before an Olympic year in an event where fitness builds year after year. And then it's like, February to October 2023 is Chicago. So I'm 6-7 months away from 7-8 months, I should say, away from Chicago 2023. And so you can almost say like when I was getting knee surgery, like Chicago 2023 wasn't even in my mind at that point. Like it was like, do whatever I can to get healthy. But in reality, it was kind of a blessing because it really like changed my mindset. Because essentially what happened is like when I got knee surgery, you got to think that running is my livelihood, it's my career, but then it's also very much like my identity, and it's also very much like my drug, like my endorphins. And so when all that is taken away, like all of it is taken away, like it was a pretty rock bottom moment for me, probably the lowest part of my career. But that really allowed me essentially to savor every single moment back to full health. Like I enjoyed every mile, every workout, every lift, every sauna. Like it was just like, I'm doing it. And I was like, it was like as if I was setting a PR every day, a personal best every day, right? And that was very satisfying. Like it's almost as if I could see my fitness changing day by day instead of week over week or month over month. Like it was like very satisfying. And my gratitude like was just like through the roof because I didn't know if I would ever be back to the same level. And so it really helped my confidence heading into Chicago because essentially I was crushing every workout, and then I was crushing every race leading into Chicago. And then I got on the start line of Chicago and I looked back at all of the training that I did, and it was the best training of my life. And that's when I set the goal of going and hitting the Olympic standard, which was 2 hours, 8 minutes, and 10 seconds.
At the start line?
I would say maybe the night before.
The night before,
essentially, I had a conversation with Coach Eystone. And I was like, what do you think about me going for the Olympic standard? And he kind of gave me the green light. And I went back, like I said, I went back and I looked at all of my workouts. And I had recently won the US 10K championships, the US 20K championships, the US 8K championships. And I had like all this confidence pulling from those races and all that training. And I was like, I'm going to do it. It also helps that there was another group, Connor Mantz, my teammate and training partner. You know, he had ran 2 hours, 8 minutes, and 16 seconds in 2022. And so he was only 6 seconds off of the Olympic standard. And so Coach Eystone kind of gave him a little bit of a leash, like a little bit of a green light saying, hey, you can go 2:06:30 to 2:07 pace. And a lot of people went with that pace group, a lot of Americans that I had beaten in previous races. And so in a way, I almost felt like I was the one being conservative. Like I was the one that was going out in 2:08, nothing faster, nothing slower. And it was like, everyone else was going way aggressive.
Yeah.
And, you know, over the last 10K, I caught every single person in that group except for Connor Mantz. And that was pretty cool to pass all these people.
That is some serious fuel to like come up on person after person after person.
Yeah, big names, big people that I had beaten, like I said, in the previous races over the shorter distance in the road racing circuit. But still, like, you never know in a marathon, like it's a different beast. And so, it was just a lot of validation that I had created a plan and I stuck to my plan and I executed well.
Also, too, like to be at Chicago where the 2 previous years you had really pushed and in the latter end of the race had really just like fallen back, to like have that surge of energy at the end where you're passing people even. I like can't even imagine what that would have felt like.
Yeah. It was like a whole new experience for sure, like to be the one passing instead of being the one passed. And I almost feel like Chicago 2021 and 2022 maybe even inhibited me a little bit. Like when I got to those last 2 miles, I was like, this is when I usually hit the wall. And so I was even a little bit more conservative those last couple of miles as Connor Mantz came into my sights. And, you know, I think if I was naive Clayton of 2021, I may have pushed and, you know, dipped into 207 and beat Connor. But because I had those previous experiences in my mind, I was like, no, just hit the Olympic standard. Just stay on pace. Don't do anything special. Don't do anything crazy. Just stick to the goal. Yeah, stick to the plan. Now, I think everyone thinks that they can run faster after they've had a good race. Like, oh, I could have gone 30 minutes faster. But so no regrets there. But I do wonder how much Chicago 2021 and 2022 got maybe in my way. Yeah. Or maybe helped me get to the finish line. So
yeah, I mean, that's probably too what makes you such an amazing athlete, is that you do look at your performance and always want more. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like that is why you're a good athlete.
Yeah, that is the definition of a runner. We always want more.
So I think you had like almost 4 months, like 3.5 months maybe, from Chicago to the Olympic trials. Yep. And you'd hit the Olympic qualifying standard. Yeah. So that probably felt really good coming into the trials. What did your training look like? Were you injury free? How did those months go?
Yeah. Essentially, we knew that my build to Chicago, like we knew that Chicago worked. Yeah. And we knew that build worked. And so we essentially replicated that same exact build for the Olympic trials. The Olympic trials course was also going to be a flat, fast course, just like Chicago. Yes, it was going to be hot and humid, but I had experience with heat and humidity before. The NCAA 10K was 80, 90 degrees and 100% humidity.
Oh, that's
so I was pretty used to that feeling in championship style racing.
Do you change your hydration at all for that?
Yeah, for sure. Like I've learned to, like I've had to train my gut essentially to be able to process fluids, and lots of electrolytes the day or two before the race, and then during the race a little bit. And then just being able to handle large amounts of fluids during the race. That was a big part of training. And then I did a lot of sauna preparation.
Oh, that's cool.
To just, when you do a lot of sauna preparation, you can build up heat shock proteins is what I believe what they're called. And your blood plasma level, like your blood volume essentially can hold more water, and that you can improve that as well. And there's a myriad of answers. So were you working out
in the sauna or just saunaing?
Yeah, sauna's interesting, and you can kind of target what you want. But at least for heat acclimatization, we're just in the sauna directly after our runs, usually for 30 to 35 minutes, 5, maybe 6 days a week, if you're really wanting to do it right. And maybe, you don't need maybe about a 10 to 20 day cycle is all you really need to be ready for your race. And then maybe a small taper from the sauna leading into your race. That's if you want heat acclimatization, but sauna also has tons of other benefits. And so we were using it in our training as well, just for blood flow and for health and immune support and lots of other
all the things.
Sauna is like I don't know, it's like a magical drug to me. It's really
totally good. Yeah.
So it's been a big part of my training for a long time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the sauna helped you prepare for the heat of it.
Yep.
You kind of just replicated the build that you had for Chicago.
Yeah.
So you went into the trials really optimistic. How were you feeling going in?
Yeah. It's interesting because, because Connor and I were the only two Americans that had hit the Olympic standard, there were only 2 spots available at the Olympic trials to make the Olympic team. And that was kind of a little bit frustrating because it was like, well, if we were the 2 people that unlocked those 2 spots, why shouldn't we just be named to the team?
Yeah.
On the women's side, it made a little bit more sense because, there were like a dozen women that had hit the Olympic standard. And so there was kind of this idea that they had to have a trials to figure out which women should be selected. But for the men, it was kind of like, should we really be doing this? And so there was a little bit of just hesitation and frustration with the process, the selection process, and just a little bit of pressure to have to perform again. Now, that being said, there was a lot of confidence going into the race, knowing that I was, one of 2 Americans that had hit the Olympic standard, and training had gone really well. I had been relatively injury-free. But yeah, there was just one weird nuance as well, is that essentially if Connor and I had taken third, if either of us had taken third, we had no ability to go unlock a 3rd spot for the United States. And this is maybe getting into the weeds of the selection procedures, but essentially because we had already unlocked a spot for the United States, even if we were 3rd, we could not, after the trials, go unlock another spot for ourselves.
Yeah.
We were 100% dependent on somebody else, another American, essentially unlocking that 3rd spot for the United States team. And that felt just kind of like we were powerless. We had no control.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like most athletes, and we say it all the time, you got to control what you can control and focus on what you can control and forget about those things you can't. And just to keep your mind at ease and at peace. I'd also really embraced this underdog mentality, in the press conference and in the media leading up to it. I recognized that I was not in a lot of people's top 3 to make the team, or top 2, I guess, to make the team. And I kind of took that and kind of with a chip on my shoulder, just kind of embraced that mentality and kind of labeled myself as an underdog. And I think that helped me to kind of have a no pressure approach towards the trials. Whereas a lot of other athletes have really high expectations. Expectations are good, and that means, you have a great opportunity in front of you. But I think for me, I had to kind of play this balance to be able to perform to my highest level.
And with that year that you had just had in 2023, to have hit rock bottom, as you put it, and to have built yourself up to the fittest you've ever been in the same year, arguably, right, is probably also part of the self-confidence that you had, right?
For sure. Yeah, it's incredible what can happen in a year's time as you focus on the mundane things in your life and gratitude and just take it one step at a time. I didn't really believe that I could make the Olympic team until I hit the Olympic standard in Chicago. That's when I've always wanted to be an Olympian. I've been at the Olympic trials before, but I didn't really believe that I could do it until October 2023. That's when I hit the Olympic standard, and I was like, I actually maybe have a shot. But it is amazing what can happen in a year's time.
Yeah.
And it's pretty incredible.
So it was almost exactly a year from your surgery.
Yeah, February 2023 to February 2024.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's exactly. It was actually just under a year. Late February is when I got my knee surgery, and February 3rd was the Olympic trials. But yeah, even going into the trials, there was a lot of temptation for comparison. As people are posting on social media or on Strava or you're just hearing rumors about this guy's workout or that guy's workout or the fitness or this person's injury.
Yeah.
There can be a lot of pressure to compare. But ultimately, as I found that, like, if I could just compare February 2023 Clayton to February 2024 Clayton, there was a lot of confidence there. And that's all I could control. And yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, like your first run to run like a mile, you were so grateful for that. Like probably if 2023 Clayton had known that you would be at the trials a year later, like your gratitude would have burst through you, I bet.
Yes.
Anyway, so during the trials, it looked like, I mean, you and Connor stayed together the whole time. You had some people kind of with you for the beginning. At what point did you drop the other competitors?
Yeah, so for the first 4, almost 5 miles, it was just a big pack of 200 guys. Everybody was in the race. We were going, just over a 5-minute pace, which was pretty conservative. But shortly thereafter, Zach Panning, the guy that actually broke me in 2022, that's when he took the lead and he started running, high 440 pace. So we went 448, 449. I think there was even a 444 in there. So we really started moving. And I didn't even realize how fast we were going. Like that was kind of one of my approaches was just like, don't look at the watch, right? This is championship style racing. It's all based off of feel. And we had kind of created a short list of athletes that we would respond to if they made a move.
And Connor.
Yeah, Connor and I and Coach Eyestone. And so when Zach Panning made his move, like obviously we had a lot of respect for him. And, he had just taken 12th at Worlds in Budapest in a hot and humid race. And so we just knew that in Orlando that he was going to be a guy to contend with.
Yeah.
So when he hit the front and took the lead and started pushing the pace, Connor looked over his shoulder and he glanced at me and I glanced at him and we're like, let's go. So Connor got right behind Zach crazy. And I got right behind Connor and that's when things really started to string out. Because I was in the front of that pack, I don't really know how many guys were in that pack, but I know that we broke away and there was probably 15 or so guys for quite a while. But then by about mile 16 was the next time that I checked. And we turned around and it was essentially Zach Panning, Connor, myself, and then 4th place was kind of fading off. And that's when I like kind of started to smile to myself and be like, all right. Like we got 1 lap left of this 8-mile looped course for 26 miles. And, I think we've got a shot. And at that point too, we were still on Olympic standard pace, which pretty much meant that if Zach Panning crossed the line under the Olympic standard, that we could unlock a 3rd spot. So there was this feeling of like us 3 could break away and we could unlock the 3rd spot for Zach, and all 3 of us could be named to the team. And there's also this really funny moment about that time where Connor turns around as well, sees that there's only 3 of us, and he puts his hand backwards. And I'm running right behind him and I'm like, why the heck are you sticking your hand out? And I give him this, and I realize that he wants a high five. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I give him this high five, and you can catch it on NBC, but it's like the sloppiest, worst high five you've ever seen. Like it's pretty bad. But it was a special moment where I realized that like Connor was still Team Clayton. Like he was still on my side and that we were going to do this together. And that was pretty special.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
So at what point did you guys pass everyone?
Yeah. So by about mile 20, 21 is when Zach Panning started to fade.
Okay.
We had let him lead most of the race because Connor and I, we just needed to make the Olympic team. We didn't need to run fast. And anyway, so when Zach started to fade, that's when Connor actually stepped up and said, hey, we're still on Olympic standard pace. Get behind me. Let's go. And
to
Zach.
Dang.
And then I came up on Zach and I said essentially the same thing. I said, tuck in, like, let's do this. We're going to go get that 3rd spot. But then by about mile 22, Zach started to fade. And that's actually when, that's when Connor was still in the lead. But then by about mile 23 is when Connor turned to me and said, hey, like, I'm not feeling very well. We're going into this headwind. Will you take the lead? And that's when I essentially took the lead. That was kind of a pivotal moment for me because, you know, my number one goal going into the race was obviously to make the Olympic team.
Yeah.
But then my second goal, more than anything, was to do whatever I could to help Connor make the team. But obviously, like, if I wanted to win the race and if I wanted to, like, essentially be selfish, like, my best move is not to take the lead. But it was pretty incredible to see and look back how I responded almost instantaneously to his request. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And from there on out, that's when I was, you know, the crowds were so loud that I kept looking back and checking that he was there. And I was like, stick on me, stay right there. I'm not going to leave you. Like, we're doing this all the way to the finish. And it was kind of this cool moment where I got to help Connor, especially because, like, you know, talk about my knee surgery, and Connor had essentially helped me from knee surgery all the way to the Olympic trials, all the way into the Chicago Marathon where I hit the Olympic standard, and then all the way to the Olympic trials. Like, he was there for me emotionally, but then also, like, he's my training partner, and he's been the one that's led most of the workouts and really pushed me to become the runner that I am. And so it was kind of interesting, you know, not that I hadn't led workouts, but in the race, it was interesting to kind of have this moment where I kind of got to return the favor and take the lead for a while. And yeah, as we approached the last mile to go, that's when the crowds got really, really loud. And I had done a lot of visualization in preparation for this race. And like I said, I'd gone back and I'd listened to Meb Keflezighi's book probably a dozen times. And it talks about how he celebrated when he won the Olympic trials in 2012. And, you know, I've also seen Ryan Hall when he won the Olympic trials in 2008, and, like, their celebrations are what stick in my mind. Like, it's pretty iconic television where you see them go and grab an American flag and they're celebrating and they're pumping up the crowd. Yeah. Anyway, as we approached a mile to go, like, all that visualization that I had done pretty much every night leading into the race for the last, you know, 6 months or whatever. Yeah. Like, that was what was playing through my mind. And I was like, oh, this is my moment. Like, this is my chance to celebrate. And so I ended up actually, like, going into that home stretch, 600 meters to go, I veer off to the right and I try to grab an American flag, but they won't hand one to me because they were told not to give me an American flag if the race was close. But Connor was there. Yeah. But I didn't really think about Connor. And so then I go back to the middle and I say to him, like, hey, come up beside me. Let's run this in together. And that was a pretty special moment because it's just so loud and I was just pumping up the crowd. And then
you looked strong then too.
I
you
felt
looked
good.
So strong.
Yeah, it was pretty special. Like, I felt good. I knew I was going to make it to the finish. And I should say, like, even with like a mile or two to go, we were hearing like 30 seconds on third, 40 seconds on third. Like, we knew that we had a lot of real estate. And so at that point, it was kind of like this moment of just celebrate it, enjoy it, don't mess it up. And yeah, do whatever I can to help Connor get to the finish line.
So Connor's still hurting at this point.
Yeah, he's hurting. And you know, you talk about my mentality going into the race. Well, Connor's mentality was very different. Like, he was very, you know, he was the favorite going into the field or going into the race. Like, he had all the pressure, the expectation, and ultimately, like, just was handling it the best he could, but really just, it was really hard for him. You know, he had woken up at like 3 a.m. the night before the race, like having a nightmare that he wouldn't finish. He was up for 7 hours even before the gun went off. Like he just had so much mental pressure, and I think that really weighed on him. He's obviously a really good athlete and arguably more fit than I was on that day, but just mentally was just absolutely drained. And so he was doing everything he could to get to the finish line, and I was doing everything I could to enjoy those last moments. So yeah, with about like 30 meters to go, as we're side by side, Connor put in this little surge, and I had forgotten that it was like a competition between him and I. Like it caught me by surprise. And so at that point it was like too late to even respond. And I think it even caught Connor off guard. I think he expected me to go flying by him, but it was too late. And so I just, stuck my hands out, and he crosses the line, and then I crossed shortly thereafter. And it was kind of this special moment where, I definitely got to celebrate the last 2 miles, but Connor got to celebrate the last 20 meters.
Yeah.
And to kind of give him that opportunity. And he deserved that win just as much as I did. Like I said, he had contributed so much to our fitness and our success on the day, and it was really special to share that with him.
Yeah. I mean, that was such an iconic moment of like, that will be playing forever and ever.
Yeah.
A lot of people probably know you from that moment. Just like arms outstretched, like celebrating the joy of like you and your teammate finishing together, basically.
Yeah.
And it was my favorite moment from the last year of running that I've seen. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's interesting looking back and seeing, like, even going and watching me finish and then watching the interviews thereafter, because like, I don't know, I think if you had sat me down and I had 10 minutes to decide, whether or not I drop Connor or I help him to the finish, or like if I win or he wins, like I think the natural man, the little devil on my shoulder would have gotten to me, and I would have been like, oh yeah, like I'm going to win. But I was really proud of the way that I acted in those moments. There's been a lot of speculation about whether or not, Connor and I are splitting prize money or bonuses, and whether that was intentional or if I let him win. And truth be told, like, I have no idea. Like, there was no planning at all. It 100% happened the way it did. And I'm really, like I said, proud of the way that it all played out, and that we're named to the Olympic team, and that, like, I think it takes something special to think about how Connor and I, we're friends and we're teammates, but we're very, very competitive. But to kind of work through that and to recognize that we're both better together, and that ultimately the Olympic trials is a prelim to a bigger race in Paris, and I'm going to be the best athlete I can by having Connor by my side in training day in and day out leading into Paris. I think that's pretty special, and I'm excited to see what we can do come Paris. Yeah.
So immediately after finishing, realizing that you're going to the Olympics, that like this goal is happening. I mean, what have your thoughts been since then? Like, how has that felt since then, since you've had time to process it, I guess?
I think it's still a daily process. Like, I remember the days, even weeks after, like waking up and being like, oh, like that really happened. Like, it was really was such a dream in my mind, like literally a dream, from all the visualization that I'd done to reality. And every morning I'd wake up and be like, oh my gosh, it actually happened. That it has taken, and it will continue to take quite a while for it to sink in, I think. But it's fun doing, and stressful doing all the planning and the preparation for Paris. There's a lot of details that are going into that. And, we can't change too much. I think that's one of the biggest, maybe, pitfalls that you can have going into an Olympic Games, is maybe feeling like you have to do more and train harder and train faster, and ultimately you'll end up on the line injured or burnt out. So we're definitely gonna put everything on the line and train our best, but it is very comforting to know that all I have to do is do what I did to prepare for Chicago and do what I did to prepare for the trials. With a little bit more added attention to details and hills, and I'll be good to go. But the fact that I'm an Olympian and that's a title that no one can take away is kind of wild to think about.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific goals for Paris that you want to like speak into existence, or are you trying to like internalize things and almost keep it more of like a personal
No,
race?
I don't mind sharing like my thoughts and my goals because I feel like I'm a very level-headed person and I can handle speaking them into existence.
Yeah.
But okay, let's be realistic here. Connor's ranked in the 50s and I'm 60th going into the Paris Olympics. And so you'd take those and you'd be like, okay, you guys have no shot at doing well. But you got to recognize that, all of those qualifiers, all of those qualifying times essentially for the Paris Games were on flat, fast courses with not non-championship style racing, which essentially means that there have been pacers and there have been, races have been optimized for times. Whereas the Olympics, it's going to be in Paris on a hot, humid day with hills, like lots of hills.
How much elevation is there in the Paris Marathon?
That's true. Depending on the audience, what they might think it's a lot or a little. I think it's like 1,400 feet of elevation gain.
For a marathon, though?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you might want to fact check me on that, but I think it's somewhere around 1,400 feet. But essentially that will level the playing field. And especially because there's no pacers or rabbits in the field, I expect it to be pretty tactical, especially with a big hill halfway through. And so I would like to think that, breaking into the top 20 or the top 10 is realistic. But also in the back of my mind, I definitely have this thought of like, if the opportunity is there and with a little bit of luck and some great training, like there's definitely a shot at getting a medal. Like I'm not going to count myself out from that.
Yeah.
And, we got to run the race to figure it out and find out what I can do. But I think, you got to speak it into existence and it's got to be in your mind. And, but that's kind of where my mindset is right now in terms of goals for Paris.
That's very cool. So are you thinking that you'll approach it with kind of that championship style race mindset, or are you going to be looking at your watch for times or?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because if you're racing for a medal, you're going to take risks earlier on in the race that may backfire and you could fade to 20th, 30th, 40th. You may not even finish. Yeah. But if you're looking at your watch and you run a smart race, you can maybe crack into the top 10. And, that's a worthy goal too. And it's kind of hard. I don't know if I really will have that answer until the weeks or so leading into it based off of my training, as well as, I'm going out to Paris in April to check out the course, and I really need to see the course and figure out what I can do to optimize my performance come Paris in August. And I don't know. One of, I think about Jared Ward, my teammate that ran in Rio in 2016, and he ended up taking 6th. And the way he did that was by running from, mid-pack and then closing really hard. I think
was he ranked when the race started? Do you remember?
Terrible. I'm sure. I don't even know. But
so he also jumped just
yes,
crazy.
Yeah. And I want to say that he passed like 10 people in the last mile. Dang. Something like that. Like we'd have to go back and fact check me on that, but it was like a lot of people at the end. And, there is this moment of doubt halfway through his race where Eliud Kipchoge, the current world record holder, breaks away. And he's like, dang it. Like, well, this was fun for the first, 14 miles or whatever. Yeah. But now, like, why am I here? What am I doing? And he simply just focused on the mile that he was in for the next, 10 miles. And then he realized that he was, passing people, and it just kind of, I don't know, built into this momentum where he cracked into the top 10 and finished 6th. And it was, I think all of the broadcasters were joking that he was the happiest 6th place finisher that they have ever seen. Like, nobody wants to get 6th at the Olympics. They're like, you got to get a medal or nothing. But like, that's a big deal against a great, international field, especially for an American man that really had no shot going in. So yeah, it'll be really tempting. I can see both plans working out well. And, you look at Chicago 2023 and it says, okay, well, maybe I should be conservative and race from the back and, pass everybody along the way and have that momentum. But then you look at the Olympic trials and you're like, no, maybe I should go out with the leaders and championship style race it and all I can do for third.
It sounds like for both of those races, though, you didn't know until the last minute, basically.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You'll find out, and we'll all see.
Yes. Yeah.
That's awesome. Just kind of in closing a little bit, I want to talk, before when we chatted, you'd said that since the trials you've received like an overwhelming amount of support, which over the last like 10 years of your career, like might have been cool to have some of that support then.
Yes.
What advice would you first of all give to like the people who are giving the support, as in brands or teams? Like, how can they better support athletes who are trying to break through into bigger things, basically?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially because like when you look at professional running, you essentially have three sources of income, right? You have your sponsorships or endorsements, you have prize money, and then you have appearances. And let me tell you, like if you're not getting prize money, you're definitely not getting appearances. Like, and so you're pretty much relying on sponsorships and endorsements. But something that I really respected about ASICS, you know, they were the ones that believed in me from day one after I won the NCAA 10K. And they were one of the few brands that were willing to support me here in Utah, in my village, in my community. And that makes all the difference. When you look at the success of an athlete, it's often not just the athlete, it's who they're surrounded by and what they're surrounded by. And I was, you know, when I was speaking with my agent about, you know, all these different groups that I could join, all these different brands that I could join, it was ultimately ASICS that was the best fit because they were willing to support me in what had already brought me success. And it really has been almost a non-transactional relationship. Like, yeah, there's a contract there and there's obligations there. And yes, I want to hit these bonuses. Like I have talked about in this podcast, I wanted to break 2 hours and 10 minutes and 30 seconds. But I recognize like they, you know, we signed the contract and I doubt they ever look at it again. Like they're just 100%, you know, it's there for their protection, but ultimately it's there for me to inspire me and to have, you know, goals to work towards, and they're never hanging that over my head. You know, there are reductions in contracts based off of like, you have to be ranked so high as an American in the marathon, or you have to run a certain number of races a year, or, you know, based off of injury, you could maybe be reduced as well. But like, those are very rarely executed. Like a brand is usually there, at least ASICS has usually been there just to support me and help me. Yeah, the last couple months have been overwhelming in the amount of support that I have received. And it is kind of too bad that, like, you know, we needed this support 4 years ago, but I'm really proud of ASICS that has been there since day one. And I've had to be careful too. Like there's a lot of people that want a piece of me and a piece of, you know, the fame and glory that comes with being an Olympian. And I've had to really be careful of, you know, recognizing those that were there from the beginning and those that are just here now because I've done well. Yeah, it's been tricky, but obviously it's really flattering too, to be wanted. I think it's been interesting too, like a lot of people, like I've done tons of interviews and media and podcasts and things like that. And one of the questions that I got asked in jest was like, Clayton, where have you been this whole time? Like, where's this personality been? And I said to them, well, the personality's been here this whole time. It's just no one's really cared to share it and to share that story. And, you know, I haven't been super animated on this podcast, but man, I get super excited and animated when I'm racing. And you know, it's been there since day one. You can find colleges races of me celebrating across the finish line like a madman, because it's just brings so much joy and it's so much fun. And, you know, this personality has always been here, but there haven't always been people willing to share it. And so I hope that brands, you know, invest in athletes long-term and they build lasting and long relationships with them, and they're beyond transactional, and ultimately support the athletes to live the dreams that they have. You know, all of these athletes have dreams and big aspirations. And I think especially as distance athletes, like we are very intrinsically motivated athletes. And if you just give them a little bit of fuel and maybe ask them very specific questions about what do you need to get to the next level. The athletes know, and with that question, you can provide them with the fuel that they need to get to the next level.
Yeah, I really like that. It sounds like you appreciate ASICS because of the way they've been able to just support you in the things that you've wanted to do and the things that you're good at. And so any other brands listening, take notes.
When I think back to, I talked about in Chicago 2022, where I faded once again and I ran 2 hours, 11 minutes and 51 seconds. Well, that was my last essentially opportunity to race well before going into contract negotiations with ASICS. My contract was up, and it was kind of this down moment where I was like, dang it. Like I just failed again. I didn't hit the time bonus that I wanted. I have no leverage going into this contract negotiation. Is ASICS going to even want me again? I signed in 2019. This was 2022. What does the future look like for me? Maybe I should just go flip hamburgers or go work my desk job as an engineer. There was just a lot of thoughts going through my mind. And, I was really, and then like I said, right after that is when I started having some knee pain too. And, but as we went into contract negotiations, ASICS was like super supportive. And in fact, they wanted to sign me for 6 more years. They wanted to sign me through LA 2028.
That's so
which is
cool.
Unprecedented in a contract standpoint for professional athletes from what I hear. I've never heard of a 6-year deal. I've heard of like 3 or 4 year deals, but never a 6-year deal. So I was pretty shocked. Now, granted, I hadn't hit any of my time bonuses, so my base wasn't anything special. It was what I was worth, but it wasn't anything special. And so I was a little bit hesitant. And so we actually only ended up signing for 2 years with a third option year. But I was just so grateful that they were just willing to support me. And, it actually ends up working out great, because now I get to go into contract negotiations in this next year or two with all the momentum that I've gained over the last year.
Yeah.
And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
I want to ask you too, just for athletes who maybe are in the place that you were in 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Like our first guest on this podcast was Hobbs. I think he runs with you
sometimes.
Yeah.
I love Hobbs.
He's great. Athletes that are like really good at marathons.
Yes.
But like just kind of on the edge of like making it to the Olympics, or just like on the edge basically.
Yep.
What advice would you give to them for support, for just like even the motivation to push through those 4 years? Because talking about it on the podcast, we talked about 4 years in 30 minutes, right? But it's a long time.
It is.
And it's a long time to have momentum and be able to keep momentum going for that time.
Yeah. Hobbs is crushing it in terms of just like adding value to who he is for brands. Like he is nailing it. And I hope he gets more eyes from brands, because like first and foremost, the most important thing is like he has tons of potential. Like he is very talented and he's very driven. And I think we're going to see some great things over the next 4 years. But then also like just in terms of just who he is as a person and a personality, and the way that he is in the social media space is just really entertaining. And I think that's an added value that a lot of professional athletes struggle with or don't do at all. It is hard, let me tell you, it is really hard to be a professional athlete, but then also like feel like you have to also be an influencer in like this day and age, right?
Persona, basically.
Yeah. Like the influencing space is taking over the professional space and across all industries. Yeah. Like it doesn't even have to be athletics. It can be any industry. And so it can be very hard as a professional to feel like you have to defend your piece of the pie. But if you can do both, which Hobbs, I think, has been able to do, you are just that much more marketable and that much more valuable, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I think when I'm speaking to those athletes that haven't quite had that breakthrough, when I look back, I've had a lot of opportunity. I got my bachelor's degree in engineering. I have my master's degree in engineering. I've had some great opportunities offered to me that I've turned down because I've wanted to live this dream. Like, it does take a very high level of sacrifice and just grittiness and being scrappy. Like, you have to be scrappy early on in this career because you just, until you've proven yourself, you're not going to get the dollars or the attention that you deserve or need. And in a way, I like that, merit-based approach towards the sport. Like, you get what you're worth. You work for what you want. It's simply black and white. You run fast, you get what you deserve. But it can be really hard. And so, while my journey might look pretty now, it hasn't come without a lot of sacrifice and a lot of grittiness and a lot of just being scrappy. And then I think the second thing is just the community around you. It's been really cool to see Hobbs embrace this community that Connor and I have been a part of. He's kind of stuck his neck out and kind of worked his way in, and we have embraced him with open arms. And it's, so wherever you're at as an athlete, like, find those that are willing to support you at where you're at and take you to the next level. Don't be afraid to go join those that are, that one step ahead of you or 2 steps ahead of you or 5 years ahead of you in terms of their career, and whether that's in sport or in business or any part of the world. Because like, you can just grow so much faster under the mentorship of others. And that's why I stayed here in Utah, is because under the mentorship of Jared Ward, Olympian, and Coach Ed Eyestone, 2-time Olympian at the marathon, like, that's where I knew I would find success. And they've been so gracious with their time and their advice and counsel to me, and it's made all the difference. I often joke now that Jared understands my world better than I understand my own world right now, as I'm discovering this, I'm kind of wide-eyed in this Olympic world right now and all these opportunities that are being put in front of me. Yeah. And Jared is the one that, like I said, he understands it more than I do, and he's helping me navigate that, and that's priceless.
Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah, from the videos I've seen of you guys just training together, it seems like something really special you've been able to build, just because you care about each other. It's obvious. And you all want to work hard. You want to be the best you can be. Yeah. And I think that energy, that's like why I wanted to start a podcast, is just because when you're around people that want to be their best, it like pushes you to be your best too. So it is just like a cool thing that you've been able to build. And people all over America now are going to try to replicate that.
Yeah,
I'm sure after seeing
call it
that
official,
finish.
call it not official. Like, it is cool to be kind of labeled now as the best marathoning group in America. Yeah. And it actually kind of surprises me how many marathon groups, or how many good marathoners are just solo marathoners, that they just train by themselves. Because, man, the value that I get from feeding off Connor and Hobbs and Jared, and the list goes on and on of other athletes, like, it makes all the difference.
Well, thank you so much, Clayton. You've been really enlightening for me to listen to, and I'm really glad that you took time out of your day to come on the podcast. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.